Hey, Channel Insiders. Happy 2025. I'm your host, Katie Bavoso, and this is Channel Insider Partner POV. We're doing things a little bit different today. I want to jump right in and sort of get into the subject matter because we're talking about predictions and reviewing 2024 and how that's going to impact 2025. To do that, I'd like to introduce two very special people that you know a lot about if you're keeping up with Channel Insider, but you don't often hear or you don't often see them, so to speak. So I'd like to introduce the two members of our editorial team who are on the ball every day reporting on the stories that really impact the channel and bringing the news to you. I'd first like to introduce our managing editor of Channel Insider, Victoria Durgan. Welcome, Victoria.
Thanks. I watch all of these and we talk all the time, but being on one's a little different. So thanks for talking me into it, I guess.
You got it. I'm very happy that you do watch these. So thank you for being a supporter of this series. We always appreciate that. Additionally, I'd like to introduce our writer, Jordan Smith. Welcome, Jordan.
Hi, Katie. Excited to be here. Thanks for having us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. A lot has happened. So I'll dive right in and first ask what news stories or events stood out to each of you the most in 2024? And of course, why? I'm really looking for that white whale of your year. What happened that you saw where you go, that really stuck out to me is how I'll remember 2024. Victoria, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, not a quiet year for the channel or for tech. I think I'll go with something that didn't technically happen within 24, but I think the ramifications of it did, and that would be Broadcom's acquisition of VMware. Again, technically a 2023 event, but I think the maybe aftermath is too strong a word, but the kind of what comes next of something like that happening with two major vendors in our space was felt pretty heavily throughout this year. And I think there's the kind of obvious tech angle to that, right? Of if partners can no longer service VMware efficiently, where do they go and who are they utilizing? And the vendors who have stepped up into that void a bit and kind of made a mark in calling themselves a VMware alternative for those who need it. And likewise for the partners who have stayed and who are still, on the VMware train and touting this as a great opportunity for them and continue to stick by now Broadcom, I think is just a great indicator of where solution provider and other reseller partners really matter to their customers, right? How businesses were able to either find another route or continue to be serviced with minimized downtime. And that's because the channel is able to be agile when it needs to be and be able to kind of bounce back when something like this occurs. And I think also now for the foreseeable future, any major acquisition news is going to be, is this the VMware of XYZ year? So I think just on that alone, it's something that's probably not going away anytime soon. And it was, for me, one of the top stories of the year.
I will absolutely comment on how I agree with you that while this was technically a 2023 story, I remember following Halloween of 2023. It was like that holiday, and then everybody wanted to know what was going on with the actual acquisition closing because it had been kind of dragged out for over a year. So you don't have to use the word aftermath, but I will certainly use the word aftermath when it comes to what happened after the VMware, the acquisition of VMware by Broadcom. I would actually use the word fallout because I think that considering the channel angle of it, and you have all of these solution providers who depend so heavily on VMware, they suddenly were left scrambling, having to find an alternative partner for something that is baked into everything that they do at their own businesses. Moving on to you, Jordan, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. What stood out to you as probably the biggest event or news story in 2024?
Yeah, I was a late joiner to the channel this year, so it was a lot of looking back and seeing what had happened over the past year. The biggest story that I ended up covering this year was the Carasoft raid on their headquarters and the SAP investigation. For those who don't remember, the DOJ has been looking into SAP for price fixing and government contracts, and it is centered around about $2 billion worth of SAP tech purchased by the US government since 2014. So this has been kind of a long time coming. Over the course of 10 years, this investigation has been going on. Carasoft, meanwhile, had their Reston, Virginia headquarters raided by the FBI. Not a very fun morning for them over there, but they are a major distributor of tech products to government agencies. They have been receiving more than 600 federal contracts for SAP tech. Um, and this was one of the first major events that I covered in the channel. I thought it was a key event in the year, especially the latter portion of the year, because I think it's just a reminder of having compliance with regulations. You have to stay on top of that sort of thing. And just as a reminder for companies in the channel, I think it served as kind of informing them again that it'll be harder to serve your customers and create value for your business under the lens of scrutiny. This is something that people are just going to want to avoid going forward, and it impacts a whole bunch of other intangible things within your company, employee morale, trust in your organization. These sort of things just have massive ripple effects.
Your reputation as a company is everything. More so than anything else that you do, more so than your wins, your failures, or the way that the public and that the industry can scrutinize you can probably hurt you more than some of the best, most amazing stuff that you've done as a company. So I will be looking forward to seeing how they recover from that in 2025, if they do. For me, if I can weigh in on this subject, I think the news story that really defined the year for me was the CrowdStrike driven Microsoft outage that literally grounded flights, halted ability to call 911, did so much, let's call it damage, because it was around the world in a single day. For it to happen and for us to all say, "Oh my gosh, what attack was this?" and then to find out that it was essentially a glitch. It was a faulty update sent to the kernel of these computers that utilized CrowdStrike with Microsoft on them, was a really scary thing to, one, I think, get our minds around, that something like this could happen when a mistake happens, that there were no redundancies in place. This literally was a perfect storm of a situation that just brought everything to a screeching halt. Two, to try to explain this to customers must have been so difficult for these channel providers. But this particular event, it wasn't necessarily the actual moment that that all happened that is why it sticks out to me as a defining moment. This event showed me that there is a lack of knowledge and understanding within our federal government when it comes to information technology and cybersecurity and the technology surrounding it overall. The reason I say this is because during the congressional hearing in September, in which CrowdStrike testified before the United States House Homeland Security Subcommittee on Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection, I was surprised by the overall lack of knowledge and understanding most of the representatives seem to have about how cybersecurity updates from CrowdStrike, or really any software that is updated via the kernel for that matter, actually happens. Yes, I'm certainly no expert on that. And yes, I would venture to say that this was probably the first time the general public actually learned about what the kernel is inside of our computers, but we aren't the ones who are a part of a national subcommittee making federal level decisions on cybersecurity. At one point during that hearing, Congressman Andrew Garbarino asked Adam Myers, the senior vice president of counter adversary operations for CrowdStrike, why were federal agencies impacted by this outage? And the answer to that is simply because you use Microsoft on those computers. Your software is still a commercial product that is used by public and private companies and civilians around the world. It's not a closed system. So this really detailed to me that they don't know that. They don't really understand that side of it. And that realization was unsettling for me. You can actually go to youtube.com/channel insider underscore news and trends to check out the under 7 minute version that we have of that congressional hearing to kind of catch up on what I mean about this. We put all the key points in there for you to be able to make your own decision about that and how you feel about it. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how that is going to impact the federal government's decisions moving forward in 2025. But let's move on to the next question. I'd love to talk about the winners this year. And I use that term very loosely because I don't necessarily think that there have to be any losers for there to be winners. I'm talking about the companies that stood out and rose above the other ones when it comes to whether it be staying top of mind, being extremely in front of our faces when it comes to either the media or just great technology that they used, or the ones who were able to capitalize on other situations that happened within the channel and within the IT industry at large. So, Jordan, why don't you kick us off in this one? Are there any tech companies or even solution providers that you see as winners this year, and why or why not?
Speaking of staying in front of your face for the entire year, it's hard to be a loser when you're one of the largest cloud providers in the world, but AWS had a pretty good 2024. They had a ton of new companies join the AWS marketplace, which is huge for them and also huge for the companies that are joining. They're able to get their products more efficiently in front of more customers in order for them to grow. They also announced several new partnerships for AI and cloud innovation. They grew with their independent software vendor accelerate program, which is another initiative by them to help companies of all different sizes be able to sell their wares, so to speak. So yeah, AWS, they have a ton of new initiatives that they're going to be just ready to go in 2025. They're going to continue growing. We have a ton of AWS information ready to go for you to check out on channelinsider.com as well. So go ahead and check that out.
The plugs continue. Yes, AWS definitely had quite a banner year. I even like to think about their investment in Anthropic, which is a huge competitor to OpenAI. So AWS, very interesting to see what they do there. Victoria, for you, what company was a winner to you in 2024?
So not to harp on what you just articulated so well, Katie, and not to maybe be a bit reverse in some of your thinking, but I'm actually going to name CrowdStrike my winner of the year.
Interesting.
Obviously, the outage was a huge problem. I'm certainly not saying that that was a winning moment for anybody involved, but I think the way that you've seen CrowdStrike really bounce back from that one moment in July, they had an incredibly strong Q3 and incredibly strong what's looking to be Q4. They have not had a lot of partner turnover. They have not had a lot of partners come out and say that that turned them off. I think in part because by many accounts, they seem to have handled that very transparently, very openly. They pushed updates as soon as they could. They seem to have a strong grasp technically very quickly on what went wrong and what they needed to fix. I don't think they're looking down at 2025 as a real problem of a year for themselves. I mean, they've been in great leagues with AWS, with other partners. They have great SMB programs for providers who are focused in that space. And I think they're continuing to make a lot of ground and keeping themselves front and center for all the right reasons and not necessarily for global outages and delays that happened in a few days of 1 month of the year. So I think even with the bad moments that they had, I think they came out and ended up finishing really strong in 24.
I think that says a lot about reputation. And when we talk about reputational damage, I think it also, I should include it, it matters how you step up afterwards. When things go wrong, how are you responding? So I agree with you. When you put it in that light, I think it's really important to consider how CrowdStrike was able to respond to something that happened. Again, this wasn't a cyber attack that forced that shutdown. So I think it's important to consider that they did respond to their mistake very quickly. And they're, as you know, Victoria, their partners were a big part of that. When it comes to thinking about winners in 2024, for me, what comes to mind is scale computing. If not for anything else, but the fact that they absolutely crushed the marketing opportunity given to them when Broadcom acquired VMware and announced that they would have an invitation only partner program. VMware, or Scale Computing that is, literally called themselves the VMware alternative and put those words next to their logo and name across all of their marketing in 2024. And that effectively sent a war cry to the rest of the channel that said, hey, were you affected by this acquisition? Are you no longer allowed to be a part of the VMware Partner Program? Come to us. We have a home for you. We will help you grow here at Scale Computing. And I have never seen that before. They literally had hats that said the VMware Alternative, Scale Computing. And I found that so impressive. They capitalized on the Broadcom acquisition of VMware like no one else I've ever seen. And from what I can tell, it's paid off for them. What surprised each of you this year?
I don't know if this is necessarily a no one saw this coming, but I do have to just say, because we haven't talked about it enough yet, the generative AI ongoing hype cycle, adoption cycle, maturity cycle that happens through the past year, I think happened at a speed that I was not necessarily expecting. I thought we'd end this year still very much in the kind of early day glory of this is revolutionary and it's going to change all of our lives. And we'd hit 25, really still kind of basking in that light. And I think the way that I kind of look back on the year and remember it, by May, I was already starting to hear from solution providers, from customers, even from some vendors and distributors who were like, yeah, generative AI tools are great, but we're not there yet. Whether that's because the tech isn't quite there yet, or we're having trouble finding use cases, we're having trouble measuring ROI. Then there were a few months of real, what is this ethically going to mean for people? Are we going to lose our jobs because of this? There was kind of this public cycle pushback moment. I think we're ending the year with nobody saying they're not using AI, but nobody really being able to necessarily define what it is in a product either. It's been very fascinating to watch. I wasn't quite in the industry yet when the cloud boom happened. So this is kind of, I think, my first time in real time experiencing the whiplash of this is the greatest thing ever. We don't know how to use it, but we feel like if we don't find a way to use it, we're really far behind, and everything that comes in between those two emotions.
A great point. I think we haven't heard the last of Gen AI, but as the year was closing out, agentic AI was really starting to bubble to the top of here's what we're going to focus on in 2025. Jordan, how about you? What surprised you this year when you think back on 2024?
Yeah, I'm going to actually add on to what Victoria said, and I'm gonna make a little bit of a movie reference. 10-year-old movie called Draft Day. I'm sorry for anybody who hasn't seen this. I'm gonna spoil it a little bit for you here. At the end of the movie, the general manager of the Cleveland Browns, played by Kevin Costner, he has his draft pick. He makes it, but you realize that this whole time in his pocket, he had written on a post-it note that said Vontae Mack no matter what. So no matter what happened throughout the movie, all these different transactions, all these different incidents, they were going to draft this person no matter what. And I feel like customers, clients, they're all going into these meetings with partners and vendors, and they have a little piece in the paper in their pocket that says AI no matter what. I don't think anybody should be surprised by the widespread spread popularity of AI in the channel. But I think what surprised me most this year is how many people simply want AI without any sort of use cases or implementation plans. Speaking to companies that provide AI tools, they still mention that they're running into this potential problem with customers and partners. And AI is just, it's become very popular, but everybody knows what AI is. They might have it in their pocket already. So what really surprised me was that people just want this technology and they want to be able to utilize it, but they haven't made the plans for it yet. And in 2025, I think that'll be a big trend is that companies are going to have to start going from the top of the enterprise down, figuring out what this plan is for AI and how they're going to use it. Otherwise, it's going to be a waste of a lot of budgetary dollars and a lot of time.
And thank you so much. We don't talk about AI enough on Channel Insider Partner POV, and I say that very
Never.
sarcastically.
I thought you were gonna say that you don't talk about the movie Draft Day enough on Channel Insider Partner POV, and
I think my biggest surprise of 2025 so far is that you were able to relate that movie to the AI conversation. So I look forward to talking about this in another year and seeing what else surprises us then. Moving on from there, folks, let's really get into talking about the partners in this situation, the solution providers of the IT channel. What is one common trend that you're seeing in the growth and the evolution of partner programs in 2024? And what would you say is impacting it? Kind of thinking along the lines of where we're seeing what partners want, how is that driving what we're seeing inside of those partner programs that are actually offering them these business relationships? Victoria, do you want to get us started?
yeah, sure. I think this is maybe a cheat answer, but I promise I will make it relevant. One of the things that's really stood out to me, especially within the last quarter of 2024, is how many vendor companies who did not previously have partner programs and who were not really engaged in the channel in any kind of formalized business approach started bringing those online throughout the past year. And I think what that speaks to is the fact that more and more companies and more technology creators are seeing the value in the IT channel as a real kind of growth strategy and not simply a, "Oh, okay, yeah, we have some MSPs over in a corner doing something, these real kind of targeted ways to bring business to them and through them. And also, B, I think we're starting to see another splintering of the ecosystem where the traditional players are not guaranteed market share just because they've had it in the past. And so I think that stood out to me in 24 is maybe solution providers saying, "Hey, what else is out there?" And if it's not something that traditionally has had a channel feel or a channel strategy, can we get it there? Can we go to them and say, "I love your tech, but I have certain needs that," whether that's multi-tenancy, whether that's I need better margins, whatever that might be, I think you're starting to see different kinds of companies approach that with open arms. And so I think 25 is going to be a very interesting year of maybe some of the traditional players and the big names that we're used to seeing just get 80, 70% of the share by default. Maybe you're gonna start to lose some of that a little bit, and so I'm excited to see then what they do in response to get their partners back.
I really like that answer. I think that is very true from what I've seen talking to so many partners out there. And I do agree with you. I'm looking forward to seeing how that impacts the power dynamic between vendors and their partners in 2025. Jordan, same question over to you. What trend are you noticing within the evolution of those partner programs?
So one of the common trends I've seen in the evolution of the partner programs in 2024 is kind of this desire of partners to gain and leverage expertise to add business value, just kind of going beyond the product focus a little bit. The skills gap is something that's still on a lot of people's minds within the channel. So having partnerships kind of serve in a real way to bridge that gap has been important. And one of the things I've seen in 2024, there's also just kind of this symbiotic relationship that can occur. And partner programs have really turned into a way that companies can learn from one another and bring value beyond the products and service, whether that's teaching somebody how to use a solution or just starting from the fact of teaching them how to figure out what they need and how they should define their use cases and how they should communicate with the rest of the company. Really a lot of sharing that goes beyond the product development and the buying and purchasing of services.
I absolutely agree with that. That's a big part of what I'm hearing on Channel Insider Partner POV from the various MSPs, VARs, solution providers in general that I'm speaking to is that they really want that support in training. And I think, especially as the AI conversation continues, which it absolutely will, and as it evolves, we're going to hear more and more about how the partner base needs that support when it comes to that knowledge. We don't all come out knowing about AI, and certainly, as we've seen over the last 2 years, it's changing. It is an ever growing and evolving conversation where we're talking about AI in different ways. Imagine just this year from AI to Gen AI to now agentic AI. It's a lot going on. Let's move on here and talk more about what you two have kind of picked up along the way this year. Are there any lessons, whether it's personal to you or just one that you've observed as being valuable in the industry that you take away from 2024? And this question can go in a lot of different directions, so I'm curious to hear your answers. Victoria, why don't we start with you?
I think one thing that I kind of constantly come back to, and I think this is maybe just by nature of our work a little bit as well, but it's just how important people still are, right? How important human interaction still is, even when we talk about tech. And I don't even just mean about the kind of AI conversations that have dominated that conversation, but in any case, there are always human beings at the heart of tech decisions. It's one thing to buy a product, it's another thing to be able to deploy it for an employee to use. And I think we've seen this come up a lot in security as well, that you can have all of the best of breed solutions you want. And if you're end user customer has an employee that's going to click a phishing email every time, it can only go so far, right? So I think what we've kind of come back to in our reporting, what I always kind of start every story with is just what are the people at the heart of this conversation? How do they matter? And how can people learn from people?
Jordan, over to you on that same question. When you think about a lesson from 2024 that you've learned, either personally or one that you've just kind of observed happening in the industry, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, sort of adjacent to what Victoria was saying, as humans still being a central part of everything that happens within the channel. I think communication is just a vastly important area that a lot of companies have emphasized, but a lot of companies still do need to do a little bit of work on. I've touched a lot during our conversation here today about developing use cases and making sure that there is just this unified approach to adopting new technologies, new services. And that starts with having communication across the entire enterprise. Different branches of companies need and offices, they need to be sort of in lockstep on adopting new technologies, from IT departments to legal to the C-suite. These are things that can't be siloed off into different parts of the company, because technology is just becoming so pervasive with how we do business and how companies operate. You don't have to be an IT company specifically to be involved in this either, or to have legal ramifications or anything of that nature. So having communication is just a valuable lesson, I think, that you can take into not just the business world, but of course into all of our personal lives, really.
I absolutely agree with that. I try to be over communicative, probably to a point where both of you have examples of where you go, "Hey, Katie, maybe stop slacking me at this point." We get it. We know. Going on from there, Jordan, staying with you for this next question. You joined us middle of the year, and this was also your first entry into the channel. You've done a beautiful job, but your background was in a different subject. So I really want to know, what has it been like immersing yourself in this world for the first time? And what were your initial thoughts just coming into the channel space compared to how you feel about it now?
My thoughts over the past few months have definitely been that it is a unique industry. My impression of it is that there really are a lot of companies, though, that are in the channel and they're solely focused on driving value for their customers and always thinking about them above all else. I won't say it's altruism, because, of course, this is how companies make money, but it really is their lodestar, thinking about what the customer wants first. Sometimes I think we have this vision of engineers just cooking up game-changing tech and seeing what they can cobble together and then throwing that out into the world and trying to sell it. But really, in the channel, these solution providers, they start with the question of, my customer has this issue, how can I resolve it for them? And all the successful solutions, all the successful products, they start from that very simple and basic question. Of course, these products can be applied to other companies across different industries, but it really starts with that kind of hand in hand approach that these channel partners have established with their customers and in helping them out.
Great points there. We are so happy to have you, Jordan. So I'm very excited to know that you are finding the core of this so easily, which is the customers at the end of the day. So, Victoria, knowing that you've been working in the channel your entire career so far, did anything surprise you or stand out about the industry since joining Channel Insider earlier this year? Did you learn anything new?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the risk of sounding like annoyingly cliche, there's something new to learn every day. And what I mean when I say that is I think to Jordan's point, so much of the channel, if you really drive into it, is about relationships and about who you trust, right? Who customers trust from a partner level, who partners trust on a vendor level and a distribution level and everything in between. I think it's really just about how you show up every day and what you want out of the people around you. And the more I get to talk to more of those people from whichever side of the spectrum they're on, everyone has a slightly different perspective. Everyone has a slightly different need, slightly different focus. You know, I can talk to somebody in the morning who thinks that agentic AI is the final frontier, and somebody in the afternoon who really doesn't care, frankly, about any of it and just wants to know that when they open their laptop every morning, their email's going to work. And all people need service from both ends of that spectrum and everywhere in between. And so the best days that I get to work here are the days where I just get to talk to a whole bunch of people and learn from them and absorb them like a sponge. And so it's been great. It's been great to kind of sit on that middle of the fence, so to speak, or middle of the triangle. I don't know which shape we're using anymore, but yeah, there's something new every day. And the minute you think you have a hold on it, there's 4 new acronyms that pop up and you don't know anything anymore. So it's enough to keep you busy for sure.
It's one of those things where I totally agree with you, where you say, I think I finally got my finger on the pulse. And then all of a sudden, it seems to change within one afternoon. So here's the fun part, guys 2025 predictions. Let's talk about it. What company, strategy, or technology do you think will take off in 2025? Or a completely different prediction that maybe I'm not kind of prompting you for right now. Let's talk about it. Let's crack into it. Victoria, let's start with you.
There's a million ways you could go with this, right? I think what I'm focused on is a bit of a prediction to the degree that I can predict anything in tech. I've heard a lot from channel partners, from solution providers, VARs, etc., who are really starting to look outside of the big three hyperscalers in terms of what cloud adoption and consumption is going to look like in 25. I'm not going to sit here and say that, by the end of the year, no one's going to be talking about AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. That's certainly not going to be the case. But I do think we've seen the wave of cloud and we're starting to see really particular niche cases come up that companies outside of those big three are filling gaps for. And so I'm interested to see how that market starts to shift a little and whether that coincides with this kind of ongoing conversation we're having around hybrid, multi-cloud, and whether we're returning to on-prem, how AI demand and data demand are going to slot into both of those. I think it's going to be a big year for cloud, but not in the ways that we've necessarily talked about cloud up until this point.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with you. And I look forward to seeing where those conversations go. Jordan, over to you. When it comes to your 2025 predictions, what's on your mind?
So for 2025, and this might seem a little bit obvious, but I feel like it's worth mentioning is cybersecurity. I think it's always been important, but I think over the next year or so, it'll become even more key as regulations start to take shape and all these different ethical considerations start to take shape when it comes to AI. AI is just going to continue to grow in the channel. People want it. People want to use it for their business to automate processes. But this will also coincide with the growth in AI used by threat actors to help them with breaches, to create certain phishing tools like deep fakes and creating false voice recordings to try to trick people into getting into your systems. And as I mentioned before, AI is more pervasive than ever. People know what it is beyond these scary entities from movies. They have AI in their pockets. They're utilizing it on a day-to-day basis in a lot of cases. And I think security, as it relates to the data management that could go into feeding these learning models, detecting AI enhanced breaches will be much more important, and also just meeting regulatory standards that will be starting to develop more and more. We're already seeing a little bit of it, but keeping on track of those will be important for the channel going forward.
And, I think that's going to lead into compliance being taken much more seriously than it's been in the past, where you're not necessarily going to see it hand in hand with cybersecurity. It's going to be its own standalone priority, especially knowing that the AI conversation is continuing. How is that going to impact the way that we do business? How is that going to impact the way that customers trust those solution providers and trust those vendors? And how are they showing it and showing up with that compliance. So I think we'll see that a lot more too. Before I share my prediction, I do have to say I don't know if this will happen, but because of my observation of what I saw at the congressional hearing for CrowdStrike, I could venture a guess to think that this might be something the federal government agencies are considering a bit more, but let me explain. So, again, the CrowdStrike outage this year showed how interconnected the government is with these commercial software companies, and if they want to avoid future outages, they'll either have to work with these existing companies and great minds to come up with a solution or regulate the existing ones more. Truly, I believe that the great minds within technology are working in the private sector and not in the government. So I think they're going to have to find a way to work more closely together to protect government operations. And we'll see how that goes in 2025. Additionally, I think 2025 will be the year of true AI computers because the end of life of Windows 10 could mean a surge of new computers on the market for personal computers. And I think the top hardware companies should capitalize on this with AI enabled computers because we don't have any true ones at the moment and we're wondering where they are. So I do look forward to hearing more about how computers with that AI technology baked in, truly incorporated directly into the hardware. I look forward to seeing those on the market and hearing how that's going to go. And just wrapping up here, folks, I also want to talk about some of the companies that we'll be watching in 2025. Whether they touch the channel or whether they don't necessarily do so directly, I definitely want to hear about the companies that you'll be following closely. Jordan, what's on your mind as far as what's at the top of your list where you'll be following those companies this year?
To bring it full circle, we'll definitely be keeping track of what's going on with the SAP and Caresoft investigation. Just want to see what sort of, I don't want to use the term fallout from that because that just makes it seem like it's so desperate of a situation. But it could also just be a learning lesson for both companies, a learning lesson for other companies who are watching this situation unfold. So I want to be keeping track of that. And as you mentioned too, the AI enabled devices that we are going to start to see, keeping track of companies like Intel with their AI PCs and these first iterations that we'll start to see. We'll see how they impact the channel and how they become more pervasive over the course of 2025.
Victoria, for you, companies or tech trends that you'll be following this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few too many companies to name specifically, but within one tech trend that I'll be keeping an eye on and whoever wants to say that they're playing in the space, I'm interested to see when and where sustainability, environmental sustainability goes from a kind of altruistic, nice to have thing we talk about to a real kind of practical offering that solution providers and vendors are working together on for customers. I think with an increase in, to go back to this conversation, compliance and regulatory needs, supply chain emission conversations, and the like, I think we're going to see more businesses want to take a tangible step and not just say, oh, we're sustainable and good for the planet to say that they are, but to be able to really start to show some effects of their work and their broader supply chain management work as it relates to ESG guidelines, to whether those are federal or state regulations and the like. But I think we're going to start to see that shift towards a greener technology. And someone's going to have to define what that means.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that there is starting to be a bit of a kind of a muddling when people are using terms then and I associate it to an extent with greenwashing because I want to see some actual data that shows that you've been able to reduce your carbon footprint if that's what you're telling me you're going to be able to do. As far as companies I'll be watching in 2025, Intel. Intel is about to rebuild and step into its next chapter. Whether or not that's a good thing or a failure, I don't know yet, but I'll be watching. I want to know what's going on and what's going to happen with their foundry plans now that former CEO Pat Gelsinger suddenly retired from the company. I want to know how they're going to gain share in the AI market if they do it all and really compete in that space. I'm also interested in how they're going to invest in the channel while doing these things after completely gutting their channel team this year. So that's a company I'll be keeping a close eye on. Another company, a little less channel related, but still a massive one to keep an eye on. I'll be watching OpenAI closely because many of the founding members of the company and those brought in with a vision to keep their AI offerings safe and secure and be responsible with them have left. That team has very much dissolved and not always leaving on good terms. So this is a company that I think has had such an amazing 2024 by being at the top of all the headlines on everyone's mind. Chat GPT is something that is so ubiquitous across the AI conversation. It's almost the Kleenex of that AI conversation. So I look forward to seeing how they're going to be able to compete and continue that momentum. But this could be the year that we see somebody kind of rise up and overtake them. So anything could happen. It's anybody's guess. Folks, brings us to the end of our time together. If we want to get in touch with you in 2025 and be able to talk about the different news that we have going on at our companies, or perhaps we want to be interviewed on Channel Insider Partner POV, I don't know, or we just want to talk about channel happenings and be able to talk to you about that, where can we reach each of you?
So I'm probably more reachable than I should be most days. So you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm just under my name, Victoria Durgan. Happy to chat there. We do also have an email dedicated to getting news tips and submissions right to the CI edit team. So feel free to email us together at news@channelinsider.com, and one or the two of us will be happy to see your message and get the ball rolling if and when it makes sense.
Find me over on LinkedIn. You can find me at Jordan Smith. You might need to add technology advice in that search bar because I have a pretty common name, but you should be able to find me.
And I'm Katie Bavoso. You can reach me at katie.bavoso@technologyadvice.com. That's our parent company, Technology Advice. You can also check out channelinsider.com for all the episodes of Channel Insider Partner POV and our awesome content on there by Victoria and Jordan. Head on over to our YouTube page, youtube.com/channelinsider_news and trends. You can watch all of our editorial content there, as well as follow Channel Insider Partner POV episodes. And if you'd like to reach out to Channel Insider to inquire about Partner POV, how to be a part of it, how to be on it, you can email me at partnerpov@channelinsider.com. You can also listen to us across all of your favorite podcast platforms as well. Thank you so much. It's been an incredible 2024. I'm so excited about 2025.